Minister, I'm glad to participate in this debate today, and I took careful note of Minister Ryan's opening statement and the stretching targets that he highlighted in terms of the Climate Action Plan. And I have some questions in relation to certain sectors that the Minister saw. Maybe if I just go through some of them, Minister, and you might come back to me in writing if you please. Firstly, in terms of the transport sector and the adoption of electric cars. And we're now starting to see the pinch points that's coming in the country in terms of electric car consumption. Firstly, we have the range anxiety that's building because of the lack of charging infrastructure in the country, and we also have the costs rising. And indeed, the Green Party were at the forefront of ensuring that hybrid cars weren't included in terms of the programme for government. And I think that was a mistake. But I'd ask you, Minister, in terms of the analysis now of electric car consumption, where are we going in terms of the worldwide production? And we know the figures that we had here of 1 million cars on the road by 2030 electric. We're not going to get anywhere close to that. But there's also the issues of the minerals that are produced in electric cars and the ethics around the harvesting of the likes of lithium and cobalt, particularly in countries where child labour is being used about that. And again, has Ireland taken any steps in terms of trying to understand these considerations? And beyond that, I just point out to you, in Waterford this year, the local authority has announced a plan to provide an additional 12 on-street charging points in the city as part of the plan for the coming year, in a city where electrical car adoption is running at 15% per annum, the same as it is nationally. So, Minister, I'd ask you maybe to come back to me and address some of that. And I'd also ask you, is it realistic to suppose that people who live outside of the urban areas can adopt electric easily for the points that are raised? Firstly, the costs. Secondly, the range anxiety, and also that they cannot access suitable and frequent public transport alternatives. And it just wonders, it speaks to me that potentially the climate agenda is trying to direct our rural populations into urban populations over the next 20 years. Is that where it's going? The Minister spoke about electricity generation and the great opportunities that are being presented to Ireland, and he spoke about the significant potential to develop offshore wind. And I'd like to just speak about offshore wind that's being surveyed off the south coast of the country at the moment, specifically in my own area, Waterford, adjacent to the Copper Coast. And what we have there is a number of farm licences being considered for wind farms totalling anywhere between 50 and 70 turbines, fixed pylon turbines, fixed to the seabed, ranging upwards, and I think all will be at 350-metre height. So, well above what the Spire in Dublin is. And I'm told by people in the maritime industry there that the shelf that runs along that coastline dips off beyond 60 metres, somewhere close to 2 miles offshore. And therefore these pylons cannot be fixed. And Minister, I'd like to understand, because we haven't had any clarity yet, exactly where are these pylons going to be situated? How close to shore are they going to come in? And beyond that, in terms of just transition, could I speak about the amenity damage that's potentially to be done and what the compensation will be? And I understand that for some of these farms, a community dividend of 15 to 18 million euro is being considered over the lifetime of the project, payable in the first 15 years of a 25-year project. I don't see the sense in that. If wind turbines are spinning for 25 years, the community needs to be getting compensated. And I don't think it's fair to say that a 1.5% of the overall investment, which these will be over €1 billion, is adequate to compensate the coastal communities that are going to be impacted in terms of wind. Could I also ask you, Minister, in terms of the contracts that are being drawn up around wind, and we obviously don't have the regulatory body activated as yet, and that is seems to be delayed. It's hard to understand. Where is Mara at this point in time? But obviously negotiations are taking place between wind providers at the moment, because they wouldn't be surveying the sites if they weren't. And what I'd like to know, in a couple of things in terms of in the contract terms, have we secured ourselves in terms of the future spot rate of electricity that will be charged to the Irish grid, as opposed to that which will be exported from Ireland? So, in other words, is it the case that Ireland could find itself paying more for the domestic produced electricity on our shores, as opposed to what might be paid on the open French or German markets where electricity has been exported? And secondly, could I ask you, have we considered at all any lever or any pivot within the contracts if the state wishes to buy out those wind farms at any point along their 25-year contract terms. And there are many reasons why the state might want to make such a purchase, but the question is it understood within the contracts that are being devised at the moment? As I say, the community dividend was the other thing, yes. Can I just go on to the agricultural sector? And it has been referenced a number of times in the House today, and that is this Coillte deal with Gresham House. And the proposal here, it appears to be for upwards of 250,000 acres could become privately taken in by Coillte and Gresham. And obviously what this would require in some cases for Irish landholders to sell their land holdings. And what is on offer to Gresham? Potentially €2.1 billion of state supports and subsidies that should be going into the rural and regional economy, that should be going to support Irish farm growers, and to my mind, not funds in Threadneedle and Bond Street. And in terms of the licensing authority at the moment, Minister, you might be interested to know that of the 2022 licensing applications processed, Coillte achieved 110% of its licence applications, which I'm sure they were very happy about. But by contrast, private felling only achieved 80% and private afforestation only achieved 60%. So we cannot get, our private growers cannot get their forestry licences approved, and at the same time we have a new forestry programme being talked about by the department, and nothing as yet considered for the ash dieback programme, which a lot of growers are already in, and they need to understand what the impacts of that are before they can go again. But I would echo the calls of other people in the House here today. I am absolutely opposed to the idea that Irish subsidies, state subsidies, will go to support UK or foreign equities in terms of our domestic forestry sector. We have ample amount of growers and farmers in this country who are prepared to grow forestry if they are given access to the subsidies and the licences, and that's not happening at the moment. And one other area I'd mention to you, Minister, in terms of agriculture, is the whole issue of multi-seed pasture land. And I brought, Minister Ryan was in Waterford about 14 months ago. I thought he was coming down to review the great work being done by the Waterford Institute of Technology into multi-seed sward analysis, which has been going on for 5 years, but at the time he didn't have the time to look at it, unfortunately. But can I recommend a film on Netflix to you, Minister, called Kiss the Ground? And maybe you've seen it. It's narrated by the American actor Woody Harrelson, and it basically talks about desertification, which is an ongoing climate challenge right across the world. And largely it's to do with the tilling and spraying of land, which is stripping the topsoil and ultimately killing the microbiome underneath. And we have a lot of work going on in the country, as I say, particularly down in WIT, in terms of multi-seed pasture land, which it appears, could remedy part of this problem and could return the microbiome, but also could add additional inputs in terms of carbon sequestration. And we have no policy in place at the moment, Minister, in the country to incentivise farmers to move into these systems. So I would ask you, please, maybe to take those in terms of the Climate Action Plan. I'd appreciate if you'd return to me on the questions that I've asked, Minister. And I think at the end of the day, what everybody needs here is we do need stretching targets, but we also need just transition with the emphasis on the word just.
Now we have